A pitch really is just a kind of a persuasive explanation of what you're trying to do. So if you're an author and you're trying to get an agent, essentially you can't assume that if you just explain your book to them in massive detail that they're going to immediately want it. You have to frame it in a way which is persuasive and interesting and intriguing to them, but equally it needs to be substantial too. You can't just sit in front of somebody and say, oh, I've got the best book ever. You know, you have to give some sort of explanation or you know, flesh it out for them. And of course, one of the big challenges is that you're trying to describe or evoke the unknown to them, and you have to kind of do it in terms of the known, which is why comparisons crop up a lot in kind of book pitches, because, you know, unlike, you know, if I've you know, sort of invented a widget, I can show you the widget and, you know, you can see it and you can play with it and you can immediately understand what it does. But if I've written 80,000 words of fiction, that's completely unknown to you, and I've got to find a way to explain that to you in terms that you already understand. So that's a pitch. I mean, there's a lot of information that you could talk about, and I've been thinking about this, what the sort of the important things are. I think I'd start by saying that you need to approach it with the right mindset to kind of guide you through your own personal sort of checklist of what you need to tell them. And I'd say that the first thing to do is to, and this is true when you're pitching anything to anybody, is think about the audience. Because particularly if you're a creator, you know, your thing, your book, your project, you know, it's so overwhelming in your perspective. You need to kind of pull away from that and think about, okay, what does that mean for them? Because the danger is that you just start describing this thing and you get into the detail and you really want to be comprehensive and you want to do it justice and you want to, you know, make sure that they understand the whole thing. And that can be very much to the detriment of getting them enthusiastic about the thing. So you need to think about who are they and what do they need? Because these agents, you know, they've all got their own lists, they've all got their own enthusiasms, they've all got their own tastes. It's not always that easy to discover what they are, but you can do it. And you need to sort of form some sort of mental model of what will feel like an exciting opportunity to them, and then work back from there. And I was trying to sort of grope for the right kind of, you know, metaphor for this. It's almost like kind of building a bridge, I think, you know, with different sort of spans to it. And if you can imagine, you know, there's you as an author, there's your mind, there's your personality, there's who you are as a person, and then there's your work. Then, you know, ultimately you're trying to build a bridge from that to your agent, and from your agent to the publisher, and from the publisher kind of into the minds of your readers, which is where you want to go. And in some ways, I think it's quite a good thought experiment to actually sort of think about those different stages and how they would work out for you ideally. And you could start at the end and say, well, you know, what is my book? What am I trying to do in the minds of my readers? Am I actually just trying to entertain people? Am I trying to do something that's really, really funny? The intended effect is really, really entertaining holiday read. Or is it, I really want to help people, you know, battle, or, you know, with their struggle with dementia, you know, and that's the main purpose of it. You know, and then kind of come back one span of the bridge, as it were. You know, what does that mean for a publisher? What's the competitive marketplace there? And then come back again. You know, where does the agent fit into this, and why would they want this? And maybe that's overthinking it. I don't know, but I suppose I'm just trying to say that you need to consider what your work might represent to your agent first and foremost. And think about things like, I mean, but yes, they will want to know what your book concept is, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. They will want to have some idea of, you know, what its place is in the world. They will also want to have some idea about you. You know, why is it you writing this book? How do you and your book kind of relate to one another? Because if you've got a really strong reason to be writing it, then that kind of helps them. It actually helps them sell it. And if you've got a vision for how you want it to be published, I mean, it's really, really important for an agent to know what your ambition is, actually. You know, as an agent myself, you know, if somebody talks to me and they say, well, you know, I've built, you know, I had a conversation the other day with a guy who's built up a whole business, you know, to do with, you know, kind of like professional communication. And he's saying, look, I only want to do this if I can get it to this level. And it's a really, really punchy level. And that might have seemed a bit arrogant, but actually I really appreciated him saying, you know, this is what my time is worth. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but at least we both know where we stand with it. Whereas I've got, you know, a client of mine I've just done a deal with. You know, she's just one of the most kind of committed people, and she's, for her, writing books about the environment is just part of her personal mission in the world. And actually getting the book properly published, that's the goal. The advance and all the other stuff, it's important, but it's secondary. She just wants it out there and done right. So making sure, don't assume that a potential agent will know all that stuff about you. You know, what your ambitions are, what your purpose is. The main way you can prepare for a pitch is literally just to practice it. And, you know, it's a bit like, you know, in politics, you know, they red team things, don't they? They get, you know, like somebody for Hillary Clinton's debate, somebody on her press team will have posed as Donald Trump to be the annoying adversary. That's probably not a very helpful scenario to bring in. But, you know, just get somebody to act as an agent, and you have a go at explaining your work. You know, maybe actually record yourself on a phone. So you can see, well, what was my body language there? Did I seem enthusiastic? I was trying to be enthusiastic. Did I seem enthusiastic? Did I seem thoughtful? Whatever. It's kind of, I mean, I think it's really important to just get comfortable with talking about your work, because if you have, as discussed, been really, really immersed in it, then that's great. But it can mean that switching gears and being the person sort of broadcasting about your work, trying to communicate about your work, that can be quite difficult. So giving yourself a little bit of practice, I think, is the absolute key. I think absolutely into the agent, you've got to know who's on their list. I mean, just tactically, I mean, it can, I mean, you have to know whether they've got authors like you on their list. If so, have you read them? You know, are you able to say, look, I'm a real fan of Maggie O'Farrell, who I notice you represent, Victoria, if you were talking to Victoria Hobbs, you know, and I'm, you know, I just really admire, you know, her career, and you know, it's kind of obvious how that would work. Some agents have a really kind of broad range of interests, and, you know, they've got stuff from all over the place. Others seem to specialize, and I think it's quite important that you know that and kind of have a point of view on that. And then in terms of research into the, I mean, you possibly don't need to research the industry, but at least know how books are published that are like your book. So, you know, if I've, you know, written a memoir about my time, you know, I don't know, crossing the Atlantic single-handed or whatever in a rowboat, you know, I should know what's been out there that's like that, and I should have a point of view on how it was done and how they seem to be successful, and I have some kind of vision of where mine would fit in. You know, the agent's not obliged to agree, but you have to have an informed point of view on that stuff. One thing, which is, it's a really easy trap to fall into. We've talked about the trap of just going into too much detail and being too obsessed with the work, and not thinking about your audience. I suppose a related pitfall is just being kind of totally on transmit, thinking, oh, I've only got 15 minutes or however long. I've just got to get everything in there, because you need to give them some breathing space to consider what it is you're telling them. Yeah, don't rule out the idea of actually asking them some questions about their taste, about what they look for, about how they like to work with authors, what their process is, because, you know, agents are people too. They like being asked questions, and, you know, you might find out some really, really useful stuff. And actually, if it can be a conversation, if it can be a two-way street, then that might start to feel to them like a working relationship rather than just sitting here being blared at by somebody. It can be a bit scary to sort of hand over the reins of the conversation to somebody else. But I think if you start by kind of hopefully telling them something that will intrigue and interest them, and then almost just say, how's that sounding so far? You know, there's a danger they'll say, oh, not that great, but kind of better to know than not know. So yeah, consider asking questions and trying to engender some sort of back and forth. All types of fiction can seem challenging in that for a lot of novels, the real value is in the execution rather than in the concept. Obviously you've got thrillers where it's like, oh, this kind of locked room set up and the concept is everything. But most novels work on a slightly more, they work on the page, as they say. It's a bit quieter, and it's kind of hard to evoke that. And just telling the story is probably not the way to go, because it's a novel for a reason. If you could actually get the whole appeal of it just by actually explaining it verbally, you'd have done that. I think one way to sort of sidestep that, or one way to think about it, is see if you can intrigue them, see if you can give them enough of a setup, or perhaps just one incident from the story. If you can say, look, I can't describe this entire novel to you, but let me see if I can evoke the feel for you by just describing this particular scene or whatever. That's one way of getting around that difficulty. The other thing is, tell them a story about the book. What made you write it? What were you aspiring to? How did it kind of develop as you were going? Did it start? I mean, like Schindler's Ark started out as a, God, I can't remember which way around it was. Did it started out as a novel because he didn't think anybody would bully it? I can't remember, but but books can evolve in the writing, and sometimes that can be an interesting and an appealing sort of aspect of the whole proposition for an agent. I think with non-fiction, it's generally easier to explain the concept, and generally speaking, your approach, your structure, the purpose of the book should be easier to lay out. I mean, I suppose some memoirs are just all about kind of tone and whatnot, but most non-fiction should be sort of distillable a little bit better. Short stories, really tough. I suppose you can always start with why short stories rather than a novel. Are there things that unite these stories? Or in fact, is the opposite true? Are you trying out all sorts of different things? Is it a wonderful kaleidoscope of styles? I suppose having a view on other short fiction that you're aspiring to be like, or be better than, or be different to, having a position on that is important. But yeah, I think short fiction and poetry are quite hard to pitch, it has to be said. On the plus side, of course, your prospective agent, can get a very accurate feel for your work faster by reading one of them. Whereas if you're saying, like, here's my sort of 900-page novel, which you'll need to read right to the end to for the payoff, that's quite a big ask. Yeah, I think I said it before. Agents are people too. I think because they seem like the first obstacle you need to overcome in order to get published. I have heard people who are aspirant writers get quite frustrated with agents and almost see them as sort of evil gatekeepers. And I get why, because if they're the people that you're getting rejections from, it doesn't feel great. We've all been there. But they are real people, and there's a reason they're not estate agents, and that reason is they love books, and they more than just loving books, they love taking books into the world. So if you are giving them something which they can enjoy, getting engaged with, and adopt and take out there into the world, that's you're giving them a gift. So don't forget that, you know, you're not just a supplicant. You potentially got something that's really exciting for them, and that they'll really welcome. So try to treat it positively like that, and remember that they, you know, they actively want exciting new stuff. You know, they're not just there sort of sitting there. You know, they don't enjoy rejecting stuff. They want that fabulous new exciting thing to pop up in front of them, and for them to be the first person to see it. And the other thing I would say is, maybe this is for a little bit further down the line, but do remember that there's different ways of agenting, and different ones will represent different things. So it might be worth having a think about what you think you need from an agent. Is it that you're really confident in your book, you just want somebody to do the deal for you, you know, and you want the money, you want some sharky deal getter, you know, that's what you want? If so, absolutely fine. Or is it that what you've always really lacked is a creative collaborator, a mentor, you know, somebody who's going to kind of guide you through? Is it that you need somebody to explain the industry to you? Is it that, you know, you've got a really international book, and it's incredibly important that you have somebody with a really sort of international perspective? You know, all those things come into the equation. And yeah, as I say, no two agents are the same. They all bring different qualities and different abilities and different sort of mindsets to the relationship.